Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Leroy Brown of West Salem is an independent candidate in the 94th Assembly District. The election is November 3. Mr. Brown, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm curious, why are you not a R or a D and you're running as an independent?
Sure. When I was setting out to start on this grand adventure, I thought deeply about which side I would end up aligning with. And at the end of the day, though, neither of them is really doing a whole lot for me. They both of the established parties are pretty dissatisfying at this point in time. So that's why I felt the need to run as an independent.
What do you consider the number one issue in your campaign, sir?
Reducing the strain and stress in Madison and throughout the state. There's a lot of social tension. The most obvious, as we're seeing in the protests and rioting in the state and elsewhere, but there's other deeper tensions that we need to work to alleviate.
Well, you referred to the civil unrest. There are several bills in the Capitol dealing with police reforms. The governor's got 9 of them. Republican Senator Weingart has, I think, 8. The speaker's going to form a task force, and the statewide police unions have their own. Is there any specific policing reforms you'd like to see become law?
Sure. Some of the things in Governor Evers and the senator's packages look very promising. I've also had a chance to look at at least one of the police association's proposals. Greater training for officers and de-escalation. I know it's definitely a tough job out there, but some of these situations, you hate to be the Sunday morning quarterback, but you have to believe there's a different way that some of these things could have been handled. Just making sure they have the training available to them to de-escalate situations, making sure, and some communities are talking about like alternative approaches. That it seems to be an entirely viable thing. I want communities to be able to experiment to find the right fit for how they approach policing and, domestic de-escalation in their communities.
Okay, new subject. The debate in the Capitol over who should draw the next set of congressional and legislative district lines. The governor's got a People's Maps Commission recommendation. The Constitution says the party in power. What's your position?
My position, I believe that the Constitution should be amended to make it a nonpartisan group, possibly going off of something like the Iowa model or different models for independent redistricting, where it's what's often said, but it's meant to be the voters pick the candidates, not the candidates picking their voters. So something that we can get that is a little more honest that way.
As the states around Wisconsin legalize recreational and medical marijuana, what's your position?
I am in favor of looking at methods of legalization and pursuing to get a market going there where people can get a product that does what they needed to do without the stigma of potential arrest or different criminal records attached to it. I think by and large, the war on drugs has not been successful, has put a lot of pain on people. Obviously, we want to ameliorate the difficulties and harms of the harder substances, but when it comes to marijuana specifically, I'm all aboard creating a legalized market for that.
Let's talk about the pandemic. First question, on September 28th, the governor's statewide mask edict expires. Do you think it should be continued, extended, or should it end?
Well, as we're coming up, we're only a couple weeks out from that. I would hope that the legislature would at least sit down to discuss and review the facts on the ground on whether the mandate should be continued. The governor is within his powers in a medical emergency such as this to declare an emergency. I know it's put a lot of, there are folks out there who don't believe the mask will have added benefit to them. I believe it's, every little bit helps that we can to slow this thing down.
If the pandemic cut state tax collections this year, which ends June 30 by, I'm making up a number, $1 billion, what would be your response? Raise taxes and fees or cut spending?
Ideally, a mix of both. There are certain programs and spending that you really can't afford to lose without digging yourself in deeper going forward. But at the same time, we can't expect people who have been, who were holed up for months or just haven't been able to make a living. We can't expect them to pay the difference for us. So there has to be room there for both ends of that to work.
Hospitals have been on the front lines nationally and of course in Wisconsin treating COVID-19 patients. If you're in the legislature voting on the next state budget, should hospitals be an even greater priority than they might be in the current budget?
I believe in finding all the support we can for our medical community to make sure they're able to respond to situations like this, whether that be through dedicated hospitals or, trying to find a way to get more community clinics and community outreach in medicine. Just trying to basically get people on the front lines there, even, first responders support. I know a lot of communities have volunteer first responders, making sure that they have the adequate resources so that their people are safe. That way we can combat this sort of thing on every level.
State Senator Chris Capping has just introduced a bill, and it says if your business or organization follows COVID-19 guidelines to protect patients, customers, or employees, you couldn't be sued over a COVID-19 positive. Do you support that bill, that law?
In general, I would like to be supportive of places that are, taking all the right precautions and if something's still happening, working in that direction to limit their liability, because there's a mix there where the business owner needs to be responsible and the patron needs to be responsible, and making sure that, we're not bankrupting folks when, we're all aware of the dangers, and just trying to do the best we can. And as long as everyone's on the up and up, then I'm fine with trying to give them a little added protection there.
Wisconsin is a high property tax state, and that means that schools and local governments have been living with caps and limits on what they can levy in property taxes for more than 20 years. Do you think those caps should be continued going forward?
As a local elected official on the village board in West Salem, I've seen firsthand what the restraints that the state has put on local governments have led to. I definitely understand and appreciate not wanting to let a local government kind of run away with their tax policy, but at the same time, I believe they should be given a little more room for maneuverability, and a little more, even if it's just a broader adjustment that can happen to the levy each year, to give that extra room so that local communities, especially in the current crisis, aren't scraping so much just to get by.
Is it time to give local governments like the one on which you serve more revenue options? There's some people who think that local governments should be able to enact their own half-cent sales tax. Is it time to give local governments more revenue options?
The debate is definitely, it's always the right time for debate on these kinds of issues. I personally, I'm a little leery of, creating this sort of hodgepodge of local tax rates where, one community, you go to the store and the price overall is one level, and then, a couple miles away, you're paying half a percentage point more, or, even that. I think that becomes a little detrimental to the business well-being. I'm in favor of looking for additional routes, but at the same point, maybe just opening the valve wider on the routes we already have, or on like state revenue sharing and things like that.
Governor Evers last year recommended raising the gas tax. It's 30.9 cents. It hasn't been raised in 10 years or so. Could you support a gas tax increase?
I would support indexing the gas tax to make sure that it responds to the market situation each year on its own. I'm actually in favor of indexing quite a few things, so it's not this life or death legislative battle. That's just how the system works. And if it happens to be that if we look at the numbers and while this index is going to cause, broader ripple effects, we can address those as they come. But in general, just having the system, trying to get as close as we can to something that runs itself.
When local governments like the one you serve on plan a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
Insofar as it doesn't violate federal law, I'm in favor of trying to find at least the closest options for us. We in the village we've had a lot of success working with our local contractors and going out for bids, just trying to get these things taken care of. But I understand it's not. And I bring up the federal end because I know I've seen states get in trouble for the sort of being preferential to their own side of things, and that's why if it's federally allowable, we can look at getting a little more local focus there.
What's the number one thing that you do as a legislator to help rural regions of Wisconsin, like the one you live in?
Sure. So definitely rural areas being more spread out have a harder time of pulling together resources and things. Definitely having an open door for rural issues, such as farming or the road conditions are a big one in La Crosse County. But just working with local leaders to find those areas of improvement and working to get that accomplished. They may be more spread out, but our rural areas still do quite a bit of the heavy lifting in like the food supplies and the agricultural industries and elsewhere that we can't leave them behind.
And finally, differences between you and those you're running against on November 3?
Sure. This is one of those things where I'm happy to say that, at least among my competitors, there's no like, it's not like we're trying to topple some evil agent here. I'm happy to say that both of them have been very agreeable. But the biggest difference there is that while they're going, as much as they say that, they're there to work across aisles or be independent, they've still got to toe the party line. And, as myself, I would work to do what's best for the community, but also not be kind of hamstrung in those tight situations where I feel compelled to go one way or the other.
Leroy Brown of West Salem is an independent candidate in the 94th Assembly District. The election is November 3. Mr. Brown, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
And thank you, Steve. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.